The jungle was no longer the same. Something restless moved through its roots, something that could not be seen or touched, but could be felt beneath the skin of the world. For ages, life here had been ruled by instinct and strength, by hunger and the simple law of the fang. But now an unseen force stirred in the shadows, quiet, deliberate, and growing. The hominids had changed. Before, they walked in fear beneath the canopy. Every snap of a branch sent their hearts racing. Every distant roar reminded them of what they were: fragile, exposed, temporary. Yet after the fall of the trapped thunder lizard in the marsh, what lived inside them shifted. The beast still roared. The ground still trembled beneath their steps. But the hominids no longer trembled with it. Fear had not left them. Fear had evolved. Rainfall swept across the land, turning soil into rivers of thick mud. The jungle glittered under the gray sky, every leaf dripping with cold water, every surface slick. The reptiles moved through the flooded plains with heavy breaths, their weight dragging them deeper into the mire. Their dominance had always been unquestioned, but water had no memory of kings. The swamp did not kneel. The hominids watched the land flood and saw possibility. They learned that when the water rose, the giants slowed. When the mud swallowed their steps, it did not let go. The hominids did not need claws or fangs to hunt. They needed only patience. They began to move through the jungle with new purpose. Where predators drank, they studied the soil. Where great beasts crossed, they mapped the ground. Stones, once used only to break open marrow, now became tools of strategy. They were placed along river bends, pressed into soft mud, hidden beneath leaves. Paths were carved not with force, but with thought. The beasts did not notice. Why would they? Nothing had ever hunted them with cunning. Their world was built on power. The hominids were rewriting it with silence. The first true strike came with the coming of the swollen river season. A pack of raptors, lean and fierce, moved through the reeds, their talons clinking softly against wet stone. Their eyes, sharp as carved obsidian, swept the grasses for signs of trapped prey. They had hunted for generations without challenge. Every creature in the jungle feared them. Every creature fled. But on this day, the jungle did not flee. It waited. The raptors stepped onto the marsh path, the same one the hominids had walked days before. Beneath the water, stones had been laid in a pattern only they knew. The predators, heavy and focused on the scent of weakness, did not notice. Their feet found the unstable ground. The first raptor slipped, its hind limbs sinking into the mud. It jerked with surprise, a sound more of confusion than pain. The second turned, uncertain. And then the stones came. They fell from the high reeds, thrown by hands trained not in strength, but in precision. The strikes were not wild. They were measured, cold, aimed at joints, eyes, throats. The raptors screeched, but the marsh swallowed their movements. They were creatures of muscle and instinct, powerful but bound to their nature. The hominids had no such chains. Their instincts had become something far more dangerous: intent. The first kill was not celebrated. There was no roar of triumph, no display of dominance. There was only silence, heavy and deliberate, as the hominids circled the fallen predator. They touched its body not in reverence, but in acknowledgement. A boundary had been crossed. The hunted had shaped the fate of the hunter. Wordless, they marked the ground around the kill with bone fragments and carved stones. Not for ritual, but for something older: claim. They began to carve invisible borders across the land, using symbols only they understood. Where they had taken life, they stamped memory into the soil. The jungle felt it. Even the air moved differently now, thick with an energy that had never existed before. Predators lifted their heads more often, scanning the trees with a growing discomfort. The prey herds moved faster, sensing a new kind of danger, not from teeth, but from unseen eyes. The ancient rhythm of survival was changing, and the beasts, for all their strength, could not name the shift pressing down on them. Time passed, marked not by the rise of the sun, but by the steady spread of intention. The hominids shadowed the great thunder beast herds, not to kill them, but to study the paths they carved through the jungle. These giants created trails through dense undergrowth, flattening trees and turning mossy earth into hardened pathways. Where they walked, others followed. Creatures of claw, fang, and feather all moved along these beaten trails, drawn by ease of passage. The hominids learned these routes the way one learns the lines of a hand. They memorized every bend, every low branch, every pool where water gathered. The jungle was no longer a labyrinth of fear. It had become a map. Far beyond the river trails in the drier highlands where sunlight burned through the canopy, a larger predator stirred. Scarred from battles long past, it moved with slow, deliberate steps. Its scales cracked like ancient stone. It was older than most, a creature whose presence silenced even the boldest hunters. It had fed on raptors, fought winged terrors in the sky, and torn through the hides of thunder beasts in its youth. It had never known challenge. It had never known loss. Until now. The scent of raptor blood carried on the wind, drifting through the trees like a ghost. It reached the ancient predator, and something in its blood awakened. Not hunger, but fury. This was not a kill made by beast. This was something else. Something calculated. It followed the scent through the wetlands, its heavy frame cutting through water and brush with controlled rage. The jungle parted for it, as though in respect. It arrived at the killing ground as dusk descended, light fading into amber shadow. The bones of its fallen kin lay arranged in a deliberate formation, half buried but unmistakable. The beast lowered its head, breath steaming in the cool air. This was no act of nature. This was an act of will. The hominids watched from the high ridge, hidden among the vines. They saw the beast's stillness, the rage in its eyes. But they did not tremble. They had prepared for this moment. They had shaped the ground into a weapon long before the creature arrived. When night came, the jungle became a single held breath. The air was thick, every leaf motionless. The predator remained near the riverbank, waiting for movement. It did not know fear, but it sensed something watching. Something without scale, without claw, but dangerous all the same. The first stone flew when the moonlight revealed the beast's eyes between the reeds. It struck the creature's flank, not to kill, but to provoke. The beast roared, a sound that rippled through the canopy like a shockwave. Birds erupted from the trees. Even the river seemed to ripple with fear. The hominids did not scatter. They separated, moving along the paths they had carved into the land. The beast chased the movement, charging into a narrowing corridor of twisted roots and sunken mud. Its bulk, once an unstoppable force, became trapped by terrain shaped for minds, not muscles. It thrashed, tearing at the earth with claws like curved blades. But the mud held fast. The stones came again, precise and relentless. Each hit weakened joints, cracked scales, drew blood that steamed against cold water. The jungle watched in silence as a king fought against something it could not see. The beast roared once more, but this roar was different. Not a cry of dominance, but a sound born of something ancient and unfamiliar. Uncertainty. It struggled for what felt like ages, its great heart pounding against ribs slick with blood. But the earth beneath it cared nothing for strength. It had been shaped by hands that looked beyond the moment, hands that did not seek glory, only control. As the beast's final breaths rippled through the air, the hominids emerged from the tree line. They stood not as frightened scavengers, but as something new. They did not celebrate. They simply observed. A predator had fallen not to tooth or claw, but to strategy. The land itself had become their weapon. When the sun rose, its light struck the clearing, illuminating the massive body lying still in the mud. The hominids stood beside it, their silhouettes stark against the golden light. They had done more than kill. They had proven that mind could shape fate. The jungle, ancient and eternal, had birthed countless rulers, titans of bone, beasts of thunder and scale. But now it had birthed something far more dangerous, something that could think beyond hunger, beyond fear, beyond instinct. The beasts still roamed, powerful and relentless, but their age was fading. Their rule, once absolute, now trembled under the silent rise of a new force, a force that left no roar, no footprint, only intention. And intention, once awakened, would not stop. The throne of the jungle, built on scale and fang, had begun to crack. And from those cracks, a new empire, shaped not by nature, but by thought, prepared to rise.